We are the first generation in the history of our species to be terrified of a quiet room. We live in an age of constant auditory and visual clutter, a world where the void must be filled at all costs. From the moment we wake up until the moment we close our eyes, we are under a relentless siege of sound. If it's not the pings of our devices, it is the hum of the city, the drone of the television, or the frantic internal monologue that we use to drown out the emptiness. We have become a society of silence avoiders, treating quietness as if it were a vacuum that would suck the soul out of us if we lingered in it too long. But why? What is it about the absence of noise that feels so threatening to the modern ego? The truth is, silence is a mirror. When the world goes quiet, the distractions that we use to define ourselves, our status, our busyness, our digital personas, begin to fall away. In the silence, we are forced to confront the person we have become when no one is watching and nothing is making noise. This is the architecture of silence. It is not just the absence of sound, but the presence of self. For centuries, the masters of wisdom, the monks, the philosophers, and the poets have all known one thing, that the greatest insights are never found in the roar of the crowd, but in the stillness of the heart. To live slowly is to realize that silence is not an empty space to be filled, but a sacred territory to be inhabited. In this deep journey, we are not just looking for a break from the noise. We are reclaiming an inner kingdom that has been occupied by the clamor of the external world. We are building a sanctuary made of stillness, where the whispers of your intuition can finally be heard above the shouting of your anxieties. It is time to stop fearing the void and start realizing that the void is where everything new begins. Are you ready to let the noise die down so that you can finally hear the sound of your own life? Our addiction to noise is not an accident. It is a defensive mechanism. The ego thrives on activity. It needs the doing to feel like it is being. As long as we are busy, as long as we are listening to a podcast, scrolling through a feed, or talking to someone, we are maintaining a narrative. We are telling ourselves a story about who we are and why we matter. But silence is the death of narrative. In the profound quiet, the ego has nothing to grasp onto. It begins to feel small, insignificant, and transient. This is why we feel an almost physical itch to reach for our phones after only a few seconds of stillness. We are trying to outrun the realization of our own vastness. Spirituality and slow living teach us that this fear is the doorway to freedom. When you allow yourself to sit in the silence without reaching for a distraction, you are practicing a form of spiritual surgery. You are letting the false versions of yourself dissolve. You are discovering that you are not your thoughts, you are not your job title, and you are not the opinions of others. You are the stillness that remains when all of those things are gone. This is the inner kingdom. It is a place of absolute stability that cannot be touched by the fluctuations of the market, the tragedies of the news, or the judgments of the world. To build this architecture of silence, you must first learn to be a friend to the void. You must realize that the emptiness you fear is actually the womb of all creation. It is only in the silence that the soul can catch its breath. We must make a radical distinction between loneliness and solitude, for they are two entirely different countries of the soul. Loneliness is a hunger, it is a gap, a feeling that something is missing, a frantic search for another to fill the void within. But solitude is a harvest. It is the state of being alone without being lonely. It is the realization that you are enough, that your own presence is a sufficient companion. In our modern rush, we have forgotten the alchemy of solitude. We flee from ourselves into the arms of crowds, into the glow of screens, and into the noise of mindless chatter because we are afraid of what we might find in the quiet. But the architecture of silence is built on the foundation of solitude. When you sit in silence, you are not withdrawing from the world, you are entering it more deeply. You are moving from the surface of life, where the waves are chaotic and loud, to the depths of the ocean, where the water is still and heavy with mystery. Solitude is where the soul heals. It is where the fragments of your identity, shattered by the demands of the day, begin to come back together. In the quiet, you stop being a resource for others and start being a presence for yourself. This is the alchemy, taking the lead of social exhaustion and turning it into the gold of self-possession. A person who has mastered solitude is a person who can never be truly manipulated by the world. for they have found a kingdom within that no one can give and no one can take away. They carry their own silence with them, like an invisible cloak, even in the middle of a crowded street. In a world that never shuts up, we have lost the ability to listen. I don't just mean listening to the words of others, but listening to the unspoken reality that hums beneath the surface of all things. There is a wisdom that does not use language, a guidance that does not come from a screen. This is intuition, the quiet, steady pulse of the heart that knows the way even when the mind is confused. But intuition is a shy guest. It will not speak while the room is filled with shouting. It requires the architecture of silence to make its presence known. When we live at a frantic pace, we make our decisions based on data, on fear, or on the expectations of society. We become reactive machines, vibrating at the frequency of everyone else's anxiety. But when you slow down and build a sanctuary of silence, you give your intuition permission to speak. You begin to notice the subtle signals of your body, the quiet yes or no that arises from your gut, and the sudden flashes of clarity that arrive like lightning in a dark sky. Silence allows the sediment of your thoughts to settle, making the water of your mind clear enough to see the bottom. You realize that most of the problems you were trying to solve with more thinking actually required less thinking and more listening. The answers you have been searching for are already there, waiting in the gaps between your breaths. The architecture of silence is the bridge between your ego and your essence. It is the laboratory where the noise of information is transformed into the music of wisdom. The final stage of building the architecture of silence is the realization that this sanctuary is not a place you visit, but a state you carry. You don't need to go to a monastery or a mountaintop to find the quiet. You need to reclaim the inner kingdom that has always been yours. We have spent so much of our lives living as refugees in the noise, begging for a moment of peace from a world that is designed to keep us distracted. But you are the master of your own attention. To reclaim your inner kingdom is to realize that you have the power to close the gates. You have the power to say no to the clutter, no to the outrage, and no to the mindless consumption that leaves you feeling empty. As you go back into your world today, carry a piece of this silence with you. Think of it as a secret garden hidden within your chest. When the world gets loud, when the demands get heavy, and when the chaos threatens to pull you under, retreat for a moment into that inner architecture. Breathe. Listen to the silence that exists even beneath the noise. You are the architect of your own peace. The world will continue to shout, the city will continue to roar, and the screens will continue to glow, but they cannot touch the king or queen who sits on the throne of their own stillness. Thank you for walking this slow path with me. May your silence be your strength and your stillness be your guide. Until next time, stay calm, live slowly, and inhabit your kingdom deeply.